The world watched with bated breath as tensions flared between India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed neighbors with a long history of conflict. The situation was volatile, and the stakes were incredibly high given the nuclear capabilities of both nations. The immediate trigger was Operation Sindoor, a series of airstrikes conducted by India on alleged terrorist camps located within Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. These airstrikes were a bold and risky move, escalating the already tense situation. This operation, launched on May 7, 2025, was India's response to a horrific terrorist attack on April 22, 2025, which targeted a group of tourists in Indian-administered Kashmir. The attack was brutal and left the nation in shock. This incident, claiming the lives of 25 Indian citizens and one Nepali national, sent shockwaves through India and heightened already existing tensions with Pakistan. The grief and anger were palpable, fueling calls for immediate action. The situation was particularly alarming given the history of conflict between the two nations. Decades of hostility and several wars had left deep scars, making any new conflict potentially catastrophic. Both countries possessed nuclear weapons, raising the stakes of any military confrontation. The mere thought of a nuclear exchange was enough to send chills down the spine of the global community. The specter of a full-blown war loomed large, threatening to engulf the entire region in chaos and bloodshed. The potential for widespread devastation was immense, and the world watched anxiously. The international community watched nervously, urging both sides to exercise restraint and seek a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Diplomatic channels were buzzing with activity as world leaders scrambled to prevent a disaster. However, with emotions running high and the wounds of the past still raw, the path to peace seemed perilous and uncertain. The memories of past conflicts and losses were still fresh in the minds of many. The world held its breath, hoping that cooler heads would prevail and that the simmering conflict would not escalate into a full-blown war. The hope was that diplomacy and reason would triumph over anger and aggression. The stakes were simply too high. The potential consequences of a nuclear conflict were unimaginable, and the world could only hope for a peaceful resolution. On a seemingly ordinary day on April 22, 2025, the serene beauty of the Kashmir Valley was shattered by an act of unspeakable brutality. A group of tourists out to enjoy the region's breathtaking landscapes became the target of a meticulously planned terrorist attack. The peaceful atmosphere was shattered by gunfire as heavily armed militants opened fire on the unsuspecting civilians. The attack, which took place near the town of Pahalgam, a popular tourist destination, left a trail of carnage and despair in its wake. The terrorists, suspected to have infiltrated from across the border, showed no mercy, indiscriminately shooting at men, women, and children. The aftermath of the attack was grim, with bodies strewn across the once picturesque landscape. The attack sent shockwaves across India, evoking widespread condemnation and outrage. The government vowed swift and decisive action against those responsible for the heinous act. Fingers were quickly pointed at Pakistan, with accusations of harboring and supporting terrorist groups operating in the region. The attack served as a grim reminder of the volatile security situation in Kashmir, a region marred by decades of conflict and mistrust. In the wake of the devastating April 22nd attack, India launched Operation Sindoor, a series of airstrikes targeting alleged terrorist training camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. The operation, named after the vermilion powder worn by Hindu women, was a clear message from India, signifying its resolve to avenge the killing of its citizens. The Indian government asserted that the strikes were not an act of aggression but a necessary measure to dismantle terrorist infrastructure and prevent future attacks. On the morning of May 7, 2025, Indian fighter jets crossed the line of control, the de facto border between India and Pakistan in Kashmir, and struck multiple targets. The operation, carried out with precision, aimed to minimize civilian casualties while maximizing damage to the intended targets. Indian officials claimed that the strikes had successfully neutralized a significant number of terrorists and destroyed key infrastructure used for planning and executing attacks. The strikes sent a clear message to Pakistan and the international community that India would not tolerate terrorism on its soil and was willing to take decisive action to protect its citizens. However, the operation also heightened tensions in the region, raising fears of a wider conflict between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. The international community watched closely, urging both nations to exercise restraint and engage in dialogue to de-escalate the situation. Despite the heightened tensions, India maintained that its actions were justified and necessary for national security. The operation underscored the fragile peace in the region and the ever-present threat of conflict, reminding the world of the delicate balance that must be maintained to ensure stability. Pakistan vehemently denied any involvement in the April 22nd terrorist attack and condemned India's airstrikes as an act of unprovoked aggression. Pakistani officials claimed that the strikes had resulted in civilian casualties and caused significant damage to infrastructure, further escalating tensions between the two nations. Pakistan also disputed India's claims of having destroyed terrorist camps, alleging that the targeted locations were civilian areas. In a show of defiance, Pakistan claimed that its air force had scrambled to intercept the Indian jets and had shot down 2 Indian aircraft, capturing 1 pilot. The Pakistani military released images of the wreckage and the captured pilot, further inflaming the situation. India, however, acknowledged the loss of only 1 aircraft and demanded the immediate and unconditional release of its pilot. The downing of the Indian aircraft and the capture of the pilot became a flashpoint in the escalating conflict, with both sides accusing each other of violating the ceasefire agreement along the line of control. The incident threatened to spiral into a larger confrontation, raising concerns of a full-blown war between the two nuclear-armed rivals. Section 5. Counting the costs casualties of conflict. The exchange of fire between India and Pakistan resulted in casualties on both sides of the border, adding a human cost to the already heightened tensions. The skirmishes, often intense and prolonged, have left a trail of destruction and sorrow in their wake. Pakistan reported that at least 31 civilians were killed in the Indian airstrikes, with dozens more injured. The airstrikes not only caused immediate loss of life, but also left many families grieving and communities shattered. The Pakistani government claimed that the strikes had targeted civilian areas, including a mosque and a bus carrying civilians, resulting in significant collateral damage. These claims have been a point of contention, further fueling the animosity between the two nations. India, on its part, initially reported that 10 civilians had been killed in Pakistani shelling along the line of control. The shelling caused widespread panic and fear among the border communities. However, the Indian government later revised the death toll to 7, maintaining that its strikes had been carried out with precision and had targeted only terrorist infrastructure. This revision was part of an effort to manage the narrative and maintain public confidence. The conflicting casualty figures from both sides highlighted the difficulty of verifying information in the fog of war. Journalists and independent observers often face significant challenges in accessing accurate data. Beyond the immediate casualties, the conflict had a devastating impact on the lives of civilians on both sides of the border. Homes were destroyed, livelihoods were lost, and the psychological toll was immense. The fear of further escalation led to widespread panic and displacement, with thousands fleeing their homes in search of safety. Refugee camps became overcrowded and resources were stretched thin. The closure of airspace and the suspension of transportation services further disrupted daily life, adding to the sense of uncertainty and fear. The economic impact was also significant, affecting trade and daily commerce. As the crisis unfolded, nations around the world watched closely, issuing statements and taking sides. Some called for immediate peace talks, while others backed the actions of their allies. Global organizations, too, voiced their concerns, urging restraint and humanitarian aid. The roots of this conflict can be traced back decades, even centuries. Historical grievances, territorial disputes, and cultural clashes have all played a part in shaping the current situation. Understanding this complex history is crucial to grasping the full scope of today's crisis. In the midst of the turmoil, certain events and places have come to symbolize the deep grief and desire for retribution felt by those involved. These symbols serve as powerful reminders of the human cost of conflict and the enduring impact on communities. Amidst rising tensions, voices from both within and outside the region have called for restraint. The fear of further escalation looms large, with potential consequences that could spread far beyond the immediate area. The world watches, hoping for a peaceful resolution.